Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Sophia and I am the local shorts programmer. I am joined by Josh Lyon, who is the cinematographer and editor of Revolving and the editor of Name It After. We also have Elisa Paloschi, who is the director of The Fig Tree and also Distance Between Us. And we have Matt Horvat, who is the director of Charlie. So if you've just viewed the local shorts program and are joining us, welcome. We hope that you enjoyed all the films. And if not, be sure to check out our digital platform to get a ticket. All right, so I'm just going to kind of circle around with the questions, and I'll start with Josh. So Josh, can you describe the process of working with the director of Revolving, Heidi Latsky, and circus artist Aaron Ball to create this film?
Sure. Hi. Yeah, so it was a really interesting project. It was during a time in the last year where we were allowed to be a couple of people in a room together, but Heidi, who was the choreographer and co-director of the piece, is in New York. And so she's in New York City. So she was dialed in on a Zoom call, directing remotely through a laptop. And I was working with Aaron, and the two of us were in the studio here in Kingston. And that's my first time ever working with a director who was zooming in for the entire day. But we had made a pretty good plan in terms of the how the day was going to go and what our objectives were for the day beforehand, which meant that the actual day Heidi could sort of supervise the shoot and provide feedback as we were going. And it was kind of hilarious moving the laptop around to show the different camera perspectives and showing her the different things we were working on. But like I said, going in with a good plan in the first place meant that, we had a pretty clear idea of what that was gonna be like. So that was the actual shooting day. And yeah, the project itself was born out of a bigger project that Heidi's working on that involved doing some 3D holographic filming of different performers. And so this is actually part of a bigger series involving holographic captures of performers as part of this project. But again, due to COVID, she couldn't get into the holography studio to do that. And so she reached out to me as a filmmaker to capture using as many different cameras as possible. We had a 360 camera and a bunch of other cameras to try and capture as much of a kind of all-encompassing perspective, even without access to the holography technology. So it was sort of born out of that. And we ended up creating 2 edits of the film. She made an edit and I made the edit, which is part of the festival, that were sort of companion pieces, both interpreting the footage from this sort of 360 capture to create the 2 final films that came out of that day of shooting. So yeah.
Cool. I gotta admit, I don't know much about holography. I've never heard that word. Like, where is she kind of planning to display these projects?
So they're created as part of a sequence of what I believe is VR displayed pieces. So the other elements of the project, and she is still hoping to recapture this one someday with Aaron as a 3D captured piece. There are some samples. If you go to Heidi Latsky Dance, to her website or Instagram, there are some little samples of it. But they would be to be seen through a VR headset. So you could actually move around the performer and interact in the space with the performer as they're sort of 3D scanned doing their performance. So that's the bigger project that this is a part of. And this was a way to continue to be able to do the work and explore the same ideas and themes with the restrictions that we're currently under.
Well, that's super cool. Yeah. No, I don't have a VR headset, but I would still love to check that out. I guess you kind of mentioned the pandemic difficulties, and that made me think of a question that I actually had for Elisa, because your film is very much about the pandemic and about the sort of difficulties of communication during the pandemic. And of course, it's set on a series of Zoom calls. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, both as kind of like a theme of the film and kind of also that a thing that you had to deal with when making it.
So, yeah, it was an interesting situation. I was actually meant to be working with Claudio, who was Marcello in the film, on a hybrid documentary, and it was canceled because of COVID. So I wanted to find a way to work with him just so that we could continue our relationship. So that idea sort of came out of nowhere, but it came out of a conversation with Claudio saying, I want you to do something. Are you available? If I were to find, like if it was a two-person short, could you find someone that you'd be happy to work with? So that's sort of how it was born. Initially, we were going to do it just all on Zoom. So I was going to record on Zoom. They were going to record their screens and Zoom on their ends in Italy. They were in two different houses, obviously. But as the pandemic started to lift, or the lockdown started to lift a little bit in Italy, then it was like, well, we'll get the sound guy to go in and the other sound person to go into the other house. Anyway, end of the day, they all actually came together. They were able to be in the same house. They were in separate parts of the house. And this house where they shot is a good friend of mine, so I know it. So I was able to walk around the house with her in my mind and ask her and tell her where to create the spaces. Right. And we shot it over the course of
there. Sorry, so you weren't actually there. Oh, okay.
No, I was sitting in this room. We started shooting at midnight, our time, and we shot for about 14 hours straight. Me in my pajamas, them there. And yeah, it was really intense because I felt like I was sitting through a real conversation. You know, I was laughing, I was crying, it was so real. It was really like having a Zoom call with friends.
Yeah. It feels very real. And I was wondering like how, a film that's so centered on a relationship between, two people who are obviously married, how did the actors deal with kind of building that relationship and almost that like trust during the pandemic? So it's interesting to know they were actually able to be together in the same space at the same time.
Yeah, in the same space, but they were completely separate. Like the house is big, so they actually had very little real communication during that day. They did in the morning when they first started, but Claudio was actually Simona's acting coach. So she had trained under him for many years. So they already had a very deep connection. But my concern was that she was going to feel like she was the student still and the dynamic might not have worked, but they were complete, 50-50 partners in the construction of this. Sorry, I've already forgotten your question.
No, I mean, that was pretty much it. I guess I would follow up with like, do you think that shaped the theme of kind of the difficulties of communication during this time?
Well, I think obviously when you're not face to face with someone, your communication is completely different. So this really just reflected exactly what was happening to so many couples around the world. Yeah. And really, that's what it was about for me, is that the difficulties I'd been having communicating with friends, with colleagues, and I knew that everybody else was having that same situation. So in a way, I was just mirroring what the reality was for us. And really, it was all I could do. I mean, this was not a film that I had planned to make. I had, it just came and we started working on it really quickly. So even that, the communication was really limited also in constructing the film as well and shooting.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting when you're making a film about a situation in the midst of that situation.
Yeah. And then I think what's probably most interesting about the film is that I didn't write a script. I wrote the story. I had a series of scenes. With each scene, I sort of directed them on how to enter it and how to exit it, what was meant to happen, what that scene was meant to mean. And then I gave them a list of, point form of topics to speak about, how, things that you could use to get to that ending point. So other than that, it was 100% improv. Yeah. And so that was a really, for me being here, it was the fact that they weren't even in the same room. I think that they did an really incredible job.
Yeah,
and it was very real and very raw.
Yeah, that was actually one of my questions is how much of it was improv, because it feels very natural.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I am going to move on to Matt. So you say in your film that it's based on a true story, and I'm wondering what like intrigued you about this story, and kind of how did you go about adapting it into this film?
Yeah, so it was a story a few years ago in the CBC about this guy who was running a rental scam, and I first read it and I was like, this is awesome, this is great, I like it. Like, I mean, obviously it sucks for whoever was the victim of it, but like, just like I like a good, I like a good true crime story. I like a good
Yeah.
scheme. So I just found the story to be intriguing itself. And then I started digging a little bit, and I found some unsubstantiated claims about more into who this character was. So I thought that would make I thought it made the whole story a little bit more interesting, even though it was kind of hearsay, the other aspects to it. But yeah, so the story came out, a year goes by. I'm still thinking about it. I'm like, okay, like maybe I should make this into something if I'm still thinking about it, if it's still percolating. Yeah, so I took a few creative liberties, but most of it is accurate. I did a little bit of research. I reached out to some of his victims. I reached out to the author of the story, the writer. He didn't get back to me until I actually made the film, and then he got back to me saying, "Hey, this is awesome." But yeah, so I did some research, and I like a good anti-hero. I like a good crime story, so it kind of met the criteria. Also, it worked as like a bite-sized, non-feature film. So I just thought all those characteristics kind of came together to make a good short story.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. I understand you're saying it's a bite-sized feature film. I could definitely see it being adapted into a full, like almost kind of Wolf of Wall Street style film.
That's what I've been playing around with the idea. I did write a TV pilot version of it just to have something to shop around, but I'm playing with the idea of making it into a feature as well. Or writing it as a feature.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah. Well, best of luck with that. Yeah. I enjoy, a good crime story. So I thought that would be super cool. So Josh, I'll come back to you and ask you about specifically your film Name It After, improvised music on Wolf Island. Obviously, this film really centers, first of all, music, of course, and also nature and the relationship between those things, which of course your subjects you do speak about in the film. And I'm wondering, as you were the editor on that film, how did you incorporate those things into the editing process?
Yeah, it was actually a really interesting process. So another kind of unique scenario, which like the other film, not a circumstance I had worked in before, where we were actually working. There was a whole group of people that were editing the film together. So because it was a collaborative project with the participants, both folks you see in the film were also the filmmakers and also the editors of the film. They actually sort of came with to me with a sort of almost fully formed edits of various scenes of the film, having worked collaboratively as a team. So this is the 12 Cat Arts Collective, and they had kind of had all the different bits and pieces of the film, and they'd done some bits of animation that were not integrated, and they performed parts of the soundtrack themselves. So it was this really, really wonderful collaborative piece. And they approached me with it as an editor with a bit more experience to kind of pull all the pieces together and help craft the whole thing into one kind of cohesive feeling piece. So my role was kind of late in the game, coming in to do a lot of the post-production on that particular piece. I'm used to working on films sort of start to finish. But in this case, came into something that was already this beautiful collaborative creative thing, and really just trying to figure out some of the really fun stuff as an editor, like how do I pull all this together, how do I form something cohesive out of all of these different bits and pieces and creative ideas. As you mentioned, the sort of music and the natural environment are kind of the stars of the film, and the interrelationship between the natural environment and what that inspires musically, which turns out is something that has been a major thread in a lot of my other film work. And so when they came to me with this piece, that just sat really well for me as something to explore. It was also a really unique challenge because, you know, it doesn't have a narrative through line, and it's not really a documentary, and it sort of has all these experimental kind of elements. And it's a beautiful thing to get handed something that's nothing like what I would have done with the project, and yet to get to have that role to sort of, you know, to bring my own creative element into it, as well as respecting the beautiful work that had been done by the other creators. So yeah, like I said, it was a really unique challenge, and really exciting to get to be pulled into something that was already, you know, such a beautiful film, and it just needed that sort of tying together cohesion and some cleanup and other bits and things. So very, very glad to be a part of it, but also feel like my role was very supportive to something that already was really, really beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I would almost disagree. I think that the editing, you know, really makes that film, because it's all about putting together and contrasting those images and the music. I think that's yeah.
Yeah,
I bet it was an understatement of your role there.
It was just very collaborative. Like it wasn't me editing from scratch. It was a lot of the editing was done by other people who were involved. So yeah, so my job was editing the whole piece together, but I was given different segments that were in different states of edited completion. And so, yeah, no, it was more just that it was working with already edited material and then just figuring out how to both tighten up that material and then create the transitions and movement between the different parts, incorporate animation. So yeah, it was a lot of kind of massaging something, but it was definitely, the creative vision was, you know, David Parker, the director, and the 12 Cat group had already done so much work with the film before I was invited to be a part of it. So I was just glad I got to be kind of in that finishing stage, but I do want to give full credit to the collective and not take away from the work that they did, because I really came in at the last minute on that one.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, very, very cool. Collaborative filmmaking, you know, something we often don't see. Usually we think of, you know, kind of the single director and their vision, as opposed to all of these people coming together and putting in their contribution.
Yeah.
Very cool. So unfortunately we are out of time. I just want to thank you guys all so much for coming and talking to us about your amazing films, sharing that with us. And thank you to our audience who's going to be watching this later. Just want to say that KCFF 22 runs from March 3rd to 13th. Please check out the other videos in our series, the other interviews, to hear from the other fantastic local and Canadian filmmakers and talent that we have. So thank you guys.